It is my pleasure now to introduce the panelists for the discussion. Now, this is wildly optimistic. We've got 8 panelists for a 30-minute slot, but I know they're going to do an excellent job, and as soon as I can find the list, I will invite them up. First off, obviously, Mr. John Sheraton, who you already heard from. He'll be providing a bit more insight. Mr. Kyle Bunting from Dell. Mr. Archie Reed from HP and the Cloud Security Alliance, Mr. Ayman Ahmed from Vodafone Hutchison, Australia, and you folks can just come up as you can. Paul Harapin from VMware, Mr. Mark McWilliams from Datacom, Dr. Philip McRae from AC3, and Patrick Fair from the Internet Industry Association. And to be the moderator for this session, I will welcome back up Steve Kwan. Where's Steve? All right. Please join me in welcoming the panelists.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for joining us. As we mentioned, we don't want to run late for lunch, so we're going to try to kind of just jump into the topics right away. So first topic is, what form of cloud is your organization building on, and is security a concern in that process? Maybe we'll start with anybody who wants to answer.
Well, why don't I jump in? I'll take the lead. Well, at VMware, we've been working with the industry on the evolution to cloud for a number of years, and I guess as you saw themes through John's presentation, there is no one answer to what cloud is, from a private instantiation to public, to a combination or hybrid environment. Is it SaaS? There's a whole range of things. So what we've seen our customers do over the last 10 years is obviously use virtualization as a base of understanding what cloud provides in their own internal data center. And over the last few years, we've been working with most of the world's main service providers, many of which are here, on their own build out of cloud services. And that takes those two or three forms, which is a private capacity where an organization is large enough to be able to take hold of a certain amount of capacity for their own dedicated services, and that may be provided in a third party's data center, but provided just for them. To the ability to provide a multi-tenant shared services as is appropriate, and then the combination of both. And what I'm seeing customers work on is, how do we optimize our own internal data center? I think John touched on that. And how do we bring cloud services and to our own operation, whether that is provided by a third party or not? And then how do we seek opportunities to enhance that with public cloud services? And I'll finish off just quickly. We've seen over the last 8 years that VMware's growth started off where organizations had an issue, and they were looking at solving that issue. Originally it was NT-based apps and no hardware available. So they used virtualization, went, hey, this actually works better than it did before. So then they moved to the next piece, which was test and dev, and then they moved to non-critical apps, and now they're moving to all their mission-critical apps on virtualization. And I'm starting to see exactly the same trend on cloud. So there's no mad rush to throw everything in, but it is projects that are being looked at, test and dev, disaster recovery, peak load management, and then I think more and more apps will move that way over a period of time.
So maybe I can put a foot in the water here. Sort of being the semi-odd man out, let me ask, who here knows the Cloud Security Alliance? A few people? All right, maybe I better introduce that because I'm here representing the Cloud Security Alliance today. My day job is CTO for HP, but I'm also one of the founding directors of the CSA Australia chapter. And we wanted to have the opportunity to sort of represent what the CSA is about and address some of the points that are being raised throughout the day, throughout this whole conference. And I think to the point about what sort of cloud are we building CSA doesn't build cloud, it actually helps you understand what clouds are good for you. And that sort of goes to what the mantra of the Cloud Security Alliance is about. It's a global not-for-profit. There's roughly 33,000 members worldwide, 150 corporate members, and roughly 60 chapters. And I'm not sure whether it's publicly released, but the Australian chapter is now formalised. And it's been in operation for about a year. Anyone can join, and we encourage people to do so. The question is, why would you join? And how does it help you solve these sorts of problems as you build out your cloud? There are probably 4 key things that we do. First off is research. There's the sort of atypical guidelines that we put out that are helping to define what it is you need to understand to get rid of all that FUD. How are you going to measure things? There's education. So there are training programs, how to train your technology people, how to train your business people. There's certification of those people who want to get trained. And ultimately, there is the reference materials that we put out. So to answer the sort of core question that you asked, how do we help solve the security problem? Ultimately, it comes down to all of the programs that we have, and we deal with not only the security guidance for cloud, but for mobile, all sorts of computing. We're all the way through to registries. Who's trusted? The spreadsheet that was put up just before is the sort of thing that we do on a worldwide basis, and basically allow folks to come on, self-register, so you can do exactly those sorts of things. Ask who provides this type of service, who is secure enough for my particular requirements, and there's a whole lot more. And if you want to talk to us more about those sorts of things, we got a booth outside. But I just thought I'd put that out there because this is sort of the difference between vendors and particular customer stories here.
I'm Phil from AC3. I think I'm the token service provider on the panel. So just from the other side of the fence, we have a couple of data centers, and until last year or so, people used to give us their computers and we used to look after them with tender loving care around the clock. We still do. But invariably, as the infrastructure's come to end of life, they've said to us, well, you guys, why don't you provide it for us? Why don't you, look, you guys know what we actually need because you look after it. Why don't you provide it for us and we'll pay you by the month? So in a sense, we've eased away. I hate the word cloud and we don't use it, but we provide platform as a service for as little as a month up to 2 or 3 years. So it's kind of, you know, the market's demanding it. It's still within the data centre. They feel comfortable about that. It's still within, we do a lot of state government work. It's still within sort of, in fact, from a government perspective, we've used the word cloud and call it a government-private cloud, but to normal people, we don't use that term.
Well, I might say something. I'm Patrick Fair from the Internet Industry Association. I've been trying to think of a plausible segue for...
Don't think you're on.
No, it's not? Yeah, there we go. Unlike the Security Alliance, the Internet Industry Association is a fully Australian-based organisation, and our focus is on policy affecting the internet broadly. In relation to the cloud, we've been watching very closely the government's proposals to reform privacy laws and the extent to which redefining privacy away from identified individuals to individuals whose identity is known to somebody whose identity you don't know but who you can visit again, and the impact that will have on cloud services. We've also got the iCode out there, which it helps to secure internet services generally and is going through a review at the moment. We've been supporting a push that the Australian Computer Society is now running with for a certification of security, a sort of certification mark for cloud security. And most recently, I think you would all have seen the decision 2 weeks ago in the Optus Now case, and the implications for that for cloud services broadly is a very real issue, which is of concern to the association, and we are looking at formulating a public, or certainly engaging in the public debate on that, and we'll see whether there's an appeal. If there's not an appeal, there might need to be some law reform. But so that's the Internet Industry Association active in the cloud space.
Great, very good. We have 4 questions, so we're going to do about 6 or 7 minutes per question. Okay, let's go to the, kind of it's evolution to the first question. So we talked this morning about the movement from physical to virtual to cloud, or the Forrester definition of evolved data center to basically data center as a business. You know, in the physical world, we all had our security controls. They were pretty known, they were pretty proven. Things like compliance came in, all of that got formalized. Groups like CSA and it was IAA really helped us define that. As we go into virtualized and cloud worlds, those don't always exist. So in addition to organizations like this, and without admitting that you have compromised your security as you moved, what requests come to you in your organizations? Where do you see people making compromises, and how is that discussion playing out in your organizations? You know, we all know there's a business driver that sometimes makes people move a little faster than they should, and where are you seeing the trade-offs being made or requested?
Do I need to use this? Yeah. Mark McWilliams from Datacom. In my session this afternoon, I'm going to talk a little bit about security and a holistic approach when you're going to the cloud. So I'll give you a little bit of a tempter here. It's really about the posture that an organisation wants to take with regard to their security, because you can go, you know, sort of big vault when you're coming in, or you can sort of go piggy bank. But at the end of the day, it costs money. And the real trick with this security thing is to make sure that you are more secure than your neighbour, because if a hacker wants to get in, they will get in. You know, there is probably little you can do, and you can't spend enough to protect your environment, no matter where it is. As long as it's connected to the internet, you are vulnerable. The real trick is to spend just enough to make yourself more costly for a hacker to get to than your neighbour. You know, if your house has got a burglar alarm and your neighbour's doesn't, where's the burglar going? They're going next door. So I think that's the trick that people need to think about when they're going to the cloud with security, is test their cloud provider out. You should actually look for the standards, of course. So 27,000. Are they looking at governance standards like risk mitigation around 31,000? Those type of things. You know, look for some of the standards compliance, but know that in moving to the cloud, you will be vulnerable.
I think it's interesting that our new security posture might be Australia more secure than New Zealand. I think the challenge for us is to understand that people expect of government to keep their private information private, to keep the government's secure information secure, and there can't be any compromises around that. But we have a sophisticated framework that grows from the protective security framework that the Attorney General runs, through the information security manual that DSD produces, and the way that it's instantiated in agency arrangements to make sure that we protect those sorts of arrangements as people expect them to be protected. And that means we've got to manage that risk carefully to make sure we put the things that don't need to be locked up in a vault in storage that reflects that, and keep locked up in vaults those things that should be.
Yeah, Kyle Bunting from Dell. It's a good point. It's not about the physical to virtual to cloud. It's about analyzing the application, analyzing the data. John mentioned a great point earlier that the data.gov is hosted at Amazon, right? He evaluated that application. The data is already hosted. It's already public by definition. Analyze that application, analyze the data within that application, and see where it makes sense to keep it maybe totally private, maybe make it virtualized and private, or even take it to a fully publicly hosted public cloud environment. So you have to analyze the data, analyze the application to see where it makes the most sense.
I think also there seems to be an assumption that the cloud is inherently less secure than your own data centre. My experience would tell me the opposite may well be true. And as organisations spend more and more building up the size and capacity of their clouds, their ability to be more secure, both physically and virtually, increases. And I'm seeing our customers at VMware talking to us about how we put security. We use the term vShield. but how we attach security to the application so that if it remains in your data center or transitions to a third-party data center, the security stays with that. And I think we've seen the industry move firewalls, IDSs, all virtualize as well, so that they can attach and be mobile with the application or data set.
Just a comment. Security is a bit like hygiene. When you move into, or when you stay in a hotel overnight, you expect the hotel, surprisingly, to be much cleaner than you'd keep your own house at home. When you outsource information to a third-party provider, all of a sudden you expect the third-party provider to have much higher security than you'd ever have at home. And in a sense, security is improved. So at AC3, as we've been developing our platform as a service, and I was interested in the first speaker today, we have perimeter security, which I think is ironclad, but within the virtual server farms, we also have internal intrusion detection so we can monitor unusual activity. And clients like that. As soon as they hear that, they say, right, I feel comfortable now.
I think a current affair may have some issues with the hotel analogy, and black light may come into it. But if I were to say anything about everything you've seen today, there's a whole spectrum of things, and we've spoken about being able to assess whether the data is appropriate for the use. But we also saw before the applications, the Skype, the iTunes, the iCloud, and all that sort of thing. How many people here use one of those services, iCloud or Skype or Dropbox? Actually, a majority of people. How many people have put actual corporate information up on Dropbox or SugarSync or any one of those? There's a few there. Obviously, you've decided in your own mind that that's okay, and that may not be apropos with corporate policy, but it all comes down to an assessment against something that says, okay, I can use this, and we do the same thing in the corporate side. And one of the key things is to have the right framework to make that assessment, to make that judgment. Maybe put the black light over it and see whether there's some marks you don't really want to go into that space for, or maybe it's all clean and everything's good and a current affair got it wrong or something. But ultimately, it's an assessment against what it is that you want to use. Does it meet your needs? And then you can choose to move forward. And it's actually not that hard. There are some real concerns, but the models are relatively simplistic today. And it's not that hard.
From a legal policy point of view, the Privacy Commissioner issued new guidelines yesterday on data breach notification, for those of you interested. And of course, we're one of the few, well, one of many, but it's now becoming more common in the advanced economies to have a law that says once you've had a security breach, you must notify your customers that it's taken place. And that's proposed in the new privacy reforms. We haven't seen the legislation yet. That'll only apply to the personal information that's been released by your security breach, but it will be a major change. With my sponsors hat on, Baker McKenzie, we've acted a number of times for people who've had security breaches. In fact, only a month ago we had a cloud service provider call up completely fried because his system had been hacked and he had a breach out there. And the sort of assessment you go through is, well, what do you know about actually what happened, and how can you assess how far it's gone? And his assessment was, and I think it's generally the assessment of all suppliers, that you immediately go to your customers, you immediately fess up, you immediately try and remediate the damage. But it's a shocking situation for a business to find itself in, and it's particularly shocking for cloud service providers because often they're supporting businesses that are reaching out to their customers, and it's those businesses that are embarrassed more than the provider itself. So
this is going to get really messy. I lived in the States for 15 years, and across many of the states there was exactly this type of bill in place. There was a 6-month period there where I received 8 letters from various institutions saying they'd been breached. They couldn't tell whether my data was part of it or not, but they knew they'd been breached in some way. So on the other side, you've got to consider, to that point, whether this legislation actually creates even more of a mess. what the appropriate measure you need to take against such a breach would be, and whether complete exposure is what's really happened. How much data are you going to get from the provider or the cloud provider about what actually happened, or are you just going to have to send a letter to everybody saying something went wrong, we're not sure whether you're part of it, but according to the legislation we've got to tell you. So there's lots of stuff that's still rolling down the line. Just keep that in mind when you're sort of thinking about what it means to you.
So that's, excuse me, that's probably one of the things that's really important to us in our evaluation of cloud services, is that transparency of who is accessing your data. It's knowing where your data is residing, it's knowing what your data is being used for, it's knowing what state that data is at any one point in time. The concern would be that the business has got a huge appetite for cloud services. They see the upside and they see that this is something that they want to consume. And as information security practitioners, it's our role to ensure that we enable them to do that in the most secure way possible. We don't prohibit the business desire to take advantage of the agility and take advantage of the benefit. But to wrap in the control required to give ourselves and the business the assurance that there is safety in what it is that they are doing. We are not taking unnecessary risk, and we are aware of the risk that is being taken when using such services. If we can make an informed decision of what the risk profile is for the data that is potentially being considered for put into a cloud type environment, I think it's perfectly appropriate to say, absolutely, let's go down this path. Let's support the business's desire to leverage cloud and all that it stands for. But I think we need to ask ourselves, what are the controls there? And we shouldn't differentiate between virtual or cloud or outsourced third-party services that have been provided. The risk is the same in that you have information assets that could potentially be exposed and do something untoward towards the brand. So if that information was in your own data center, you would still have controls in there. You would still want these controls to be visible, to be known, to be effective, the governance to be in place. Just because you're pushing it out to an external boundary doesn't mean that you can push out the responsibility and the onus of risk. We need to make sure that those same controls and those same governance framework that you would apply internally is equally applied externally.
I think it's important to remember that you can't outsource reputation risk.
Absolutely.
And you bear that whatever happens, and that even the best systems need to be monitored constantly by the customer to make sure they're okay. I'll bet there are 20 people in the room now whose watches say it's the 31st of April because they haven't intervened in making sure the automatic system kept up with what was going on.
Yes, and you can check your watches. Okay, all right, next question. A little bit changing gears here. Do you have a BYOD, bring your own device, project in your organization? Why or why not?
I might jump in again, why not? I think it's really bring your own devices. I don't know about everyone else, but I've got 3. As we go around and talk to customers, you know, the whole concept of iPads, tablets, Dropbox, everything else is a concept that most customers realise is not going away, but CIOs are struggling with how we provide that same level of flexibility, but put all of the stringent security controls around it. So we've worked over the last few years on a technology that does that. It's really about helping customers with the transition from the provision of devices to the transition to the provision of services to end users, regardless of which device they use. That flexibility of a Dropbox type environment, but within a secure company or cloud provided control. So we're seeing that most customers are struggling with this and how to approach it. And it's something that we're working with them on. Be almost no customer that I see, either in Australia or anywhere else around the Asia region, that doesn't have this as one of the topics of discussion.
I think this is something that's principally for knowledge workers, and it's important to remember that that's the arrangement. As I said, there are about 250 people 250,000 people who use government IT systems all the time. Now, not all of those are going to bring their own devices. There are a couple of thousand of riflemen, and frankly, I don't want them bringing their own devices. We want to control what it is that's going on there. And I think it's important just to remember that some of these technologies are very exciting to talk about in the IT field, but they don't actually address what all of our clients, our users need or should be using in order to deliver services.
From AC3's perspective, just a case study, we're only 50 staff, and until 2 years ago I used to buy telephones for staff because we offer a 24/7 service, so it costs $130 for a phone and you pay the monthly fee. iPhones came along and suddenly the price of handsets rocketed to $700. Like, oh, so we can't provide those. So we started to provide people an allowance. They bought their own phones, and all of a sudden they were using their own devices. They were bringing them with them, and they were checking emails and work alerts from home. And we've sort of had to manage it. And I suspect almost every other organisation is in that same. And then the iPad came along, which is really an extension of the iPhone. Some government agencies, I know, people carry 2 telephones, which is unbelievably daft because we don't have enough pockets to carry 2 phones. One is the work phone and the other is the private one. That doesn't work. We just have to accommodate using the iPhone as the standard way we access home email and work email, as unfortunately I have to fess up I was doing during the course of an earlier speaker. That's just the way we work these days. We expect people to be available 24/7. We expect them to check their home emails during work as well. So we just have to learn and manage the fact that people will have these things and they're useful for work.
Can I just mention a sort of a related issue? From a public policy point of view, the expansion of these devices is causing government concern because our children can see anything and everything wherever they like, and you can't put filters and controls on these devices. And one proposed solution to that is to provide the children with a cloud-based service where parents have more control. And there are quite a few products coming out there that incorporate location-based services and parental monitoring of what kids can do on their mobile devices that are designed to address just that problem. So far I think it's still in the mix. What people can do to keep control of what their teenagers are doing once they've got a different device which is completely out of the home and the public space.
Maybe a question to the audience here. How many of you have your own devices that you use for work purposes? Almost everyone? Bring your own device. And you all have a BYOD policy or approach at work? Everyone? Yep. And how many people here would think they're absolutely secure with the policies that are in place? Not even one hand. Okay. So, as far as being able to talk about how to secure a BYOD policy, approach for a company, there are a number of things, and they've already been mentioned. The policies in place, the automation, the management, all of those components, whether you want to apply them to the cloud or the devices accessing the cloud, are how we solve that problem. And being able to, aside from the kids who can probably break down anything that is already out there, your average office worker, even us as IT professionals, probably have or need some level of management on the devices. And that is the part of the key that needs to go into these sort of thinking. Sorry. If you're thinking about how to manage it from the cloud, it doesn't really matter. You've still got to put the policies out there and be able to enforce them. And that's ultimately what it comes down to when you're talking about BYOD. We've got
a BYOD trial on at the moment, and we've categorised organisation. We've got 4,500 users, I think. We've got different types of users. We've got corporate users, we've got technology staff, we've got retail users as well, the people in the stores that sell you products. There's a different risk profile associated with each type of user. So in acknowledgement of the different risk profiles of the likelihood of the device being more secure in a corporate environment, behind access control doors, as opposed to a store which may have walk-in, walk-out type access, much more transient type people come in and out or have access to the facilities. We're trialling a system that will enable us to control the devices that are in the stores, that limits the data that is able to be ported to a mobile device in the stores, that limits the risk that that mobile device is exposed to, and potentially the data that could get exposed publicly if that device was to be stolen, and would enable us to erase it immediately. So the policy is there, the intent is there, the pilot is in place. So hopefully the next time this conference comes around, we'll have a success story to talk about.
Okay, good. Actually, we are out of time, and I don't like to keep people hungry, so we have another speaker, and we'd like to move on. First of all, I'd like to thank our panel very much for their input. And then secondly, if you take away anything from this panel, just remember, very similar to the idiom of if a tiger is chasing me and you, I don't need to be faster than the tiger, I just need to be faster than you. Australia just needs to be more secure than New Zealand. That's it. Thank you.